So we have Dana Wensberg here, our head of 3D, back again for our second episode of the weekly here. Riley and Ben. First off, as always, cheers.
Cheers.
Happy another week.
Another Friday.
Another Friday. Dana, first and foremost, we give our engineering team a lot of hype, right? Why don't you tell us exactly what it is you do here?
I'm pretty much in charge of everything geometrically oriented here. I work in our part viewer and in our back end, interacting with CAD files that people upload, be it step files, STLs, solid part files, whatever, you name it. And I sort of manage how we interact with those geometries, the information we suck out of it, and how we render it and display it in the viewer, and how we plug in those types of outputs into people's coding formulas.
Is it more work to create a step or a SolidWorks file than just an STL file?
Well, so the thing is, for most prototyping work, everyone's using the same 4 tools to make the actual geometries when you're designing it. It's like SolidWorks, Siemens, CATIA, Creo, and there's a few more, but those are the big players. And all of those systems have the capability to export to any file type you want.
And they're choosing.
And they're choosing IGES or STL and sending it. And that's just because it's not because they're dumb. It's just because that's either the way they've done it, the people around them have done it, or that's just what the manufacturers they send the files to accept. That's one of my dreams or goals of my involvement in the manufacturing space in the space in general is to just kill useless files.
Kick IGES out of manufacturing.
No, I mean, think about all the man hours.
Yes.
And efforts that are wasted.
Completely wasted.
Because people send in PDFs, STLs, IGES files when they could have, in the same amount of time, just instead of export.IGES, just say export.solidpart, export.step.
Yeah.
And it would save so much time.
Right. So the opportunity here then is to communicate how important it is then for your customers to be sending you step files, right? Things that are metadata rich,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you can interrogate them appropriately and learn everything possible about the part.
Again, it's the whole play that manufacturers are so desperate for jobs and so desperate to just keep their customers happy that they don't even think to say, hey, listen, Jim, if you gave me a step file, I could get this quote back to you in an hour instead of having to have my $80 an hour CAD guy remake this and then get the quote out to you 2 days later. And if it's Friday, 5 days later.
Yeah. You were a mechanical engineer and physics guy in college, right? And I know the story, Riley knows the story. I think our customers would appreciate hearing how a mechanical engineer and physics guy ends up becoming the guru of geometry at Paperless Parts.
Jason is our CEO, serial entrepreneur. And my father is also an entrepreneur who also went to Trinity. And Jason was working on a project before Paperless was created. And he was just looking for some advice from a Trin alum that had done something similar. So he reached out to my father. My dad picked up immediately that Jason was a very, very impressive guy, had a lot of potential, and they were trying to call, and he had me hop in to say hi. Shot Jason over my resume. He read it over, talked with me for 20 minutes, and by the end of the phone call, he said, Dana, in 3 years, I am going to hire you. No, sorry, in 2 years. He said, Dana, in 2 years, I am going to hire you.
And this phone call was what, 2015?
This phone call was when I was 19 years old, so I'm 23 now. So, around then.
Yeah.
Around then. So, fast forward a bit. I'm at Trinity. I'm getting kind of bored. School's kind of easy. I'm looking for a job for the summer. So, I was just sort of reaching out to my network. And Jason knew of this company called AddAero, which was an additive manufacturing firm in New Britain, Connecticut, which was down the street from Hartford, where I work, where I went to school at Trinity, and they were actually looking for someone to build a liquid-fueled rocket engine. Had a blast that summer. I was working on cranking through, trying to get my designs, get a budget report together for the rocket project, but it quickly surfaced that where my strengths really lied were in just hacking together scripts and making code that could just make the lives of these guys easier. And I stayed with them. I worked with them like probably 8 to 10 hours a week my junior year. And when it came time to re-up, find a new thing to do, Jason Ray came knocking again. He had just gotten Paperless Parts started with Scott, our CTO. This was probably a month after they incorporated. And I get a call from Jason. He says, I want you to come work for me.
And the timing was perfect.
And the time was perfect. And he was true to his word.
Yeah. 2 years.
2 years. And I was like, let's do it. And I didn't even know what the company was. And needless to say, it's a company that builds software for manufacturers. And what had I been doing for the last year and a half?
Exactly that.
Building software for manufacturers. That summer was awesome.
What did they like? You got to CIC and they're like, we need you to build this.
So I got to CIC and we were still plugging the marketplace. I mean, that was our thing. Like, we were going to become a marketplace.
Yeah.
And since I had already been at this additive shop, they figured, all right, Danny, you need to go figure out how to calculate additive runtimes, how to predict additive runtimes based on like the geometry of the part. But then things really started. So then we started getting more into the subtractive CNC stuff, and that's where I really fell in love. We just needed to start building out, what our geometric engine was going to do, and there was so much low-hanging fruit that
really
it was intoxicating.
Where?
So think of it. So like detecting holes.
Yeah.
Like seems like a pretty straightforward exercise. But again, there are no two geometries that are the same, and there are unfortunately a lot of horribly catted parts out there. So you need to write and regression test a really, really robust hole detection algorithm. All right, so we figured out holes, right? So what about pockets? What about slots? What about manufacturability issues?
Yeah.
How do you figure out what's going on with the step file to figure that out?
Yeah.
And so there's that piece of it, right? But then how do you get anyone to believe you? The only way to get people to buy in to what we're saying about the part that is true is you need a way to visualize it.
Yeah.
You need a way to say, this is the exact feature I'm talking about, and this is why this leads to this downstream thing.
No magic.
No magic. And so that's when I essentially was like, well, shit, guys, we need a part viewer. But once I started working on the part viewer, I was averaging, so I slept in the office 3 nights a week. And
it was a co-working space, right? So
it was a co-working. So
yeah.
we had 3 desks in this corner called Design Town at CIC on the 16th floor, and 15th floor, excuse me, and we were just heads down, buried, just like trying to change the world. Meanwhile, we had these like silly little like bicycle rack companies or like these paper mache things like all around us, and
you guys
I was horse blinders all day, just could not deal with them.
Yeah.
Eventually, what I got to was figuring out how to correlate faces for different features that we discover on the back end, and then point that towards them and render them in the part viewer. And once I figured out how to do that, I mean, the sky was the limit. By mid-July, I had gotten an offer for full time to come back.
Yeah.
And I ended up just working for Paperless like 25, 30 hours a week for the entirety of my senior year. So I managed to sandbag my schedule, and I took 4 gym classes. I took an internship for credit with Paperless, both semesters, and then I took 2 pass-fail courses, my engineering capstone, and then I took like a couple of history classes.
Yeah. So you're cranking 3 days, 4 days, completely free at senior year, right? And then you finally graduate, right? And you come back here full time, right? This is when I come, right?
Yep.
Come back here, do my internship. Luke does his internship, right? We have that whole summer. And at the end of that summer, Riley comes, right? So I go back to school. I think I'll hand it off to you now, right? And you guys can talk about the 9 months that I was at my senior year.
It was really cool to watch. Just you show up because we had never hired anyone.
Yeah, the first
for your type of role. Like so, all the hires up to that point were like, okay, let's get a coder, or someone who's either a founder or someone who's been in the manufacturing space, like intimately with one of the founders for quite some time. I mean, so you were in the manufacturing space, like door gang, but it was really cool to see that. Again, symbolic hire because we were heads down, like quote tool. We're building software for manufacturers. So it just makes sense that we brought on someone to be very intentional about loving our customers.
Oh yeah.
We cranked that whole year after that summer. I mean, so we cycled through a few unsuccessful engineering hires, which was eye opening because
we learned a lot.
We learned a lot. I mean, we learned a lot about how fast we need to go, what we need to demand of our new hires, and how to onboard people effectively, and like what are the real intangibles like to look for. And we were underestimating like how important culture was.
One thing that really interests me, right, because of your involvement with the company since its beginning, is why you feel confident that the product now and the team now is the right one.
So we mentioned it briefly before. The synthesis of Paperless was just nullifying inefficiencies in manufacturing. The marketplace was it's a great idea. I mean, what manufacturer it doesn't want free business from something? You know what I mean? So like that's what sort of made it easier-ish to sell, right? But we couldn't sell that without getting buy-in on pricing from job shops that we wanted to onboard. So we've eventually figured out from the marketplace, okay, well, we need to actually build the best quoting tool so that manufacturers can say, this is my price here, and this is the geometrically driven pricing. We wanted to set things up with formulas in our geometric interrogation so that all that stuff just populates in, and we sort of grab the knowledge of every different person involved in generating that quote, and we want to get that into like formulas that you write, so that you can just let it rip, and the estimator can be, driving the ship and can turn those quotes around without needing to always consult the person with the unique ability to say program the parts, give you a runtime for the parts, because we've encapsulated that knowledge into the system. And although it sounds obvious, we didn't really realize that the bottleneck at every step of the way there is just communication. It's talking to other people and figuring things out. And so now that we're focusing on building a communication tool that is so deeply integrated with, the manufacturing world, where everything is centered around that geometry. Everything is centered around that part file that you get from the customer that you want to have made. Providing the context of the actual geometry and the actual supporting files and what you actually need to produce outside of, Becky writing Post-it notes and saying, I need to talk to Jim about this tolerance or whatever. It's right there. Communicate right there. Communicate on the pièce de la résistance. Like, this is what you need to make. It's taken us this long, I think, to figure that out, because we've been having the right conversations with the wrong mindset. It's all about enabling unique abilities without needing to have so much overhead to access that, the beautiful minds that are out on the shop floor. It's really a straightforward concept that manufacturing just hasn't really seen before. The simplicity of it is almost deafening. Like, start with people. Start with people.
I'd say last but not least, what do you do outside of sleeping on the couch at work?
Oh, well, not much, to be honest, but I like to drink beer. I like to play spike ball.
Big Frisbee guy.
Big Frisbee guy, yeah. I got a couple of scoring records at Deerfield, but we can leave those for another time.
Well, Dana, thank you for joining us on episode 2 of the Weekly. We're definitely going to be bringing in more people, just kind of showing everybody that we're human beings down in the basement and not a bunch of robots. So